There are 9 counters in a bag. There is a number on each one of the counters. Cal takes at random 3 counters from the bag. He adds together the numbers on the 3 counters to get his total. We need to work out the probability that his total is 6. So the first thing you might think to do is to try and draw a tree diagram. But as you can see from that, it gets very messy very quickly, and you can do that, but you have to be very neater than I have here, because as you can see, I'm probably going to get very confused very easily with that diagram. So instead, I think if you just are very careful and set your working outs carefully like I have here, this is an easier way of doing it. I've just listed all of the different ways he can get a total of 6. So on the first counter, he could get a 1. On the second counter, he could get a 2. And on the third counter, he could get a 3. That would add up to 6. Or he could have got a 1 on the first counter, a 3 on the second counter, and a 2 on the third counter. Again, that's different to the first one and would still add up to 6. Or he could have got a 2 on the first counter, a 3 on the second counter, and a 1 on the third counter. Or a 2, a 1, a 3. Or a 3, a 1, a 2. Or a 3, a 2, a 1. Or the only other way of possibly getting 6 is if it's 2, 2, 2. Hopefully you can see the methodical way that I did this. I thought about if the first counter was 1, wrote down all the possible outcomes, all of the other possible combinations if the first counter was 1, wrote those down. Then I was like, okay, well, what about if the first counter was 2? And then wrote down the other possible outcomes for if the first counter was 2, and then the same thing for 3. Then I knew I had included all of the possible different outcomes. So let's work out the probabilities of each of these then. So the probability the first counter is 1 is 2 out of 9. You've got 2 chances of the first counter being 1. The probability of the second counter being 2. Well, given that he took one of the counters out, he's already taken one of the 1s out, there would only be 8 counters left, and 3 of those are 2s. And the probability the third counter is 3, well, there's 4 3s, and there'd be 7 counters left because he's already taken 2 out. So the probability of all of those happening would be 2 out of 9 times 3 out of 8 times 4 out of 7, which gives, which gives 1 out of 21 for the first one. So 2 out of 9 times 3 out of 8 times 4 out of 7. Okay, next one. Well, if you got a 1 the first time, the probability of that, we've already said, is 1 out of 9. The probability that 3 gets taken on the second counter would be 4 out of 8, because there's 8 counters left. The probability that the 2 gets taken on the third would be 3 out of 7. So that would be 2 out of 9 times 4 out of 8 times 3 out of 7. Now what you might notice here, compared to the first question, 9 times 8 times 7, we've got the same thing on the denominator. And on the numerator, 2 times 3 times 4, 2 times 4 times 3. So actually it's going to be exactly the same as the first answer there. And what you'll notice as we go through this, well, let's go through some of you might notice straight away, but let's go through a couple more steps and you'll see. The probability of the first counter being 2 would be 3 out of 9. The probability of the second counter being 3 would be 4 out of 8. The probability the third counter is going to be 1 is going to be 2 out of 7. So again, when you multiply this together, it's going to be the same as this. So you're going to get 1 out of 21 again. 3 out of 9. This is going to be 2 out of 8. This is going to be 4 out of 7. Again, it's going to give you a 1 out of 21. And it's going to be exactly the same with the next one. And the next one, these are all going to be the same. The 2, 2, 2 will be slightly different. The probability of the first one being 2 is 3 out of 9. The probability of the second one being 2 will be 2 out of 8, because we've already taken one of the 2's out. And the probability of the third one is going to be 2, will be 1 out of 7. So when you times those together, 3 times 2 times 1, multiplied by 9 times 8 times 7. So you can see why this is slightly different to the other ones. So 3 over 9 times 2 out of 8 times 1 out of 7. And we get 1 out of 84. So the overall answer then will be all of these added together. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over 21 plus the 1 over 84, which gives 25 over 84. And that's your answer.